Alright, Kyle, I'm about to do a heel jar test on you. If you feel any pain with this, it means you have appendicitis.
Okay.
Ow! My foot! This man for surgery. Hey, Kyle, what's going on?
How are ya?
Doing good. Man, so Kyle, I was fiddling with the camera the other day, and I realized that this whole time we've been doing this, we've been recording at half of the video quality that the camera can do.
Yeah.
I just kind of assumed that, default to the max setting, but
I feel like defaulting to the max setting was what I thought would happen when I quit drinking, but
yeah.
No.
That's life. I guess maybe this is an important moral lesson. Just assume that everything is default set to the minimum and work your way up from there.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good moral. We could end the video here, but I know that you wanted to talk about sort of traditional and non-traditional paths to med school and sort of just the journeys people take to get where they are. So tell me a bit more about that, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk to new students and they ask me about my journey to medical school, they ask me, did you come straight into school? Did you take a gap year? And I'm like, nah, actually I took 9. Okay. And so there's a bunch of different paths here. I'm in my 30s, and there's a couple other of us students who are in our 30s. And
from my end of it, I knew that sort of when I was in college, the atmosphere I was in, where people were always thinking, okay, I got to graduate from college with a job lined up. Maybe I take 1 gap year, but I got to know what I'm doing, and I got to have this solid plan worked out. And it was a real eye-opener for me to come to medical school and see that so many of my peers, like Kyle, had went down completely different roads, and they're still here and doing an incredible job as medical students. It really shifted my perspective. It's not necessarily just a mindless charge straight through. You have your whole youth to sort of go on whatever journey you want, and you still have that potential to end up where you want to be.
Yeah, totally. What really attracted me to the path of medicine was that it was sort of all laid out for you. You do your undergrad, and then you go to medical school, and then you do your residency, and then you're going to find a job, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes life has a way of like kind of throwing you off the path and kind of giving you your own journey, so to speak. But and that was my case for sure.
But yeah, as I want to talk about a little bit more later on, that's kind of what makes you you, and that is so special. Roads go ever on. Mine started here in Iowa and curved back home. Grew up writing sci-fi, learning about brains, working in a neural lab, writing stories spanning galaxies, training to be flexible, to take what life gives and make something even better by learning how to live. Went to college at Rice, great friends, a fun town. I learned some simple math, commit to people that count. Met a surgeon back home, he specialized in chronic pain. He said, I want to build a robot I can drive with my brain, but I don't have the time, so how about you do it? Was an exciting idea, so I got right to it. Went back to Rice, as many classes in humanities as not. Majored in biochem, but studied what I want. My mind-controlled robot started to come together. I graduated early and worked for a semester. Now I'm back home studying the signals our brains make to manifest intention from oscillating phase. I hope to make tech that'll make people's lives hecka better. And of course, chill out with people that matter.
Well, my mom was a nurse. I found myself in the hospital. Asked the doctor what she did. I found it almost impossible to think of anything else for me to do with myself. I put chef, architect, and Scooby-Doo on the shelf. To tell the truth, I was a driven little dude, but it felt like I've been missing out on something else elusive as hell. So in college, I was wild, let loose and rebel, but got so stupid dumb I couldn't even choose to excel. Well, what do you do when you can't move to the music? Do you sit or do you journey out despite the confusion? Prove it. That's what they said when my intentions were set, to do the schooling thing despite my non-traditional movements. Now I'm living proof life is all about what you do. My circuitous route I liken to a fountain of youth. From the south to California where the mountains are blue, flew the coop to Carver College, found a talented crew. Pound for pound I'm just an average student out for the truth. Doubt and confusion are the impetus to powerful tools, and science rules. And I'm out to prove that it's cool to be a nerd and proving cures to be of maximum use.
Kyle.
Hi.
Hi.
Mask off.
Oh, hi Kyle. Where'd Kyle go? I'm really confused. I still haven't developed object permanence. What?
So, Dan, I really enjoyed your rap. I really enjoyed hearing your story. I mean, like, there's so many different stories that lead to, a career in medicine.
Right.
And I had an issue when I was younger of trying to look outside of myself and to see if my experience had matched other people's experience. If somebody shared a similar story to mine, and having difficulty finding a match, I was sort of discouraged by all that, and thinking to myself, like, well, shoot, maybe I don't fit into this world. And I think that there's 2 points to that. Is you don't have to have a matching story to somebody else. In fact, like when I applied to medical school, I was often told that, it's a good thing to stand out, to have a unique story. But then at the same time, we're human, we're social creatures, and we do have this instinct, this need to belong. So it is nice to hear somebody who has a similar story, somebody who we believe understands where we're coming from, and perhaps has overcome some of the same problems that we've had, and can share experience on how they dealt with those problems to help us deal with ours.
Right. That's helpful too, but also sometimes you are just cutting your own path through that jungle, and you're trekking your own road, and while it can be challenging, there can be fun in that too, and you can gain valuable experience that only you can talk about, and that's something that's just yours and yours alone. I think that's really special too.
Agreed.
So for me, my path to medical school, I graduated a semester early, so I did spend a semester working, but I think even beyond just the time you take off, there are different perspectives and roads by which you can come into medical school. The stereotypical perception of someone who's entering medicine, they're the super hardcore pre-med, and they're taking all of their science classes, and they live for the A+ in organic chemistry. This very sort of stereotype list of qualities that these people have.
Yeah.
But for me, when I was in college, I really wasn't sure what I wanted to do looking forward. I tried out a lot of different things. I did these consulting competitions. I thought about teaching. I thought about a variety of different paths. I did a science major, but I actually, throughout the process, I took as many English and sociology and philosophy classes as I did science classes, if not more. When I was in college, I just took what I was interested in, and just through a series of events, I ended up working at this neurosurgery lab where I saw this really cool research, this brain-machine interface research, and I also saw this really cool interaction with patients in the clinic and helping steer them through chronic pain. So I kind of stumbled into it, and I saw this really cool vision, this sort of end goal of where I'd like to be, someone who's doing research and working with people one-on-one. I tried really hard to define myself, not by what I thought I should do as a pre-med, but by just what I was interested in. I worked as a counselor at an elementary school in Houston because I was really passionate about serving underserved schools. I never really looked at Student Doctor Network or the med school Reddit or all the, all those resources they have. I studied for the MCAT for maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I just kind of rolled with that.
You studied for the MCAT for 3 weeks? Would you say you winged it?
Oh, that's a reference to last episode. Yeah, well, my parent did. He actually got a higher MCAT score than me.
That's wild. I mean, I would assume because he's afraid of cats. So
of that whole story, the purpose of that is just to say that some people, you might come in super hardcore. Some people, they'll come into medical school really chill. And, for me, the difference that made was when I came into medical school, some of my peers, they had their whole schedule for the semester plotted out, and they knew everything that was going on. Me, I kind of took it a day at a time, and I got surprised by a lot of things, right? There are definitely costs to that, for not being as hardcore as everyone else, but I think slowly I grew into it. Yeah. And I feel very comfortable here in medical school now, even if it was a bit hectic, those first few months. And, whatever major you do, the classes you take, my best advice would just be, even if you're already in medical school and you're thinking about residency, just, do what you're interested and passionate in, because at the end of the day, that's you're going to make something out of that really defines you and is unique to you. And I think that is just so much more special than a few more points on a test.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing from you then is, Dan, is that we all have some boxes that we need to check, right? I mean, there's particular competencies that we need to have, and maybe some experiences that we need to have too, in order to really determine whether or not this is the right path for us.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, we can't deny ourselves that journey of following our hearts, right? Following our passion, and having the experiences there, because that's really what's going to inform us of like what we really want to do.
Right. Yeah, I feel like when you think out life too much and you try to plan it out too much, it becomes like it loses whatever that quality that makes it wonderful and enjoyable. You lose that element of surprise and excitement that feeling of when you're a kid and everything you see is something new and interesting to you. Obviously, you don't want to be like that for everything, right? If you're a surgeon and you are doing a brain surgery, you want to plan, right? There are elements of your life you want to plan out very thoroughly. And there are others that you just sort of scope out and see what interests you.
Yeah, I think that's a good take on it.
So yeah, how about Kyle? Could you tell us a bit more about your story? And
yeah, I mean, I was originally pre-med when I got into college, and I went to a really good undergrad, and I worked really hard to get there. But by the time I got there, my priorities changed a little bit, and I started partying a lot, and I had a lot of fun, and I didn't really go to class much. And this pre-med workload and the partying, there wasn't enough room for both of those. And so, a lot of people would change their behavior in order to meet their goals, but I ended up changing my goals to meet my behavior. So I kept partying, and I switched majors. I was no longer pre-med. I went into anthropology, which I thought was like just super interesting and very intellectually stimulating, and the coursework wasn't as rigorous. So I ended up giving up on medicine and just going a different route. And after I got out of college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and which is totally fine. Like if you finish college and you don't know what you want to do, and you didn't take all your pre-med prerequisite courses, and you didn't volunteer 600 hours, that's totally fine. You can do it 5 years down the road like I did. So I worked some odd jobs. I mean, I sold surfboards at a surf shop in Santa Monica for like 2 years, and then what else I do? I worked as a roughneck in the oil fields in Southern California for a year, and then I worked as a construction estimator in Los Angeles for 6 years. As I was working as this estimator, I quickly realized that this job was becoming a career, and I had to ask myself, I think at about 25 years old, is this what I want to be doing for the rest of my life? Do I want to be working with blueprints and crunching numbers? And so I sort of dug back into my brain, and well, what was it that I've always wanted to do? I've always wanted to be a physician. Like my mom was a nurse, and I got exposed to medicine early. So in order to see whether medicine was right for me, I went into the hospital and I volunteered. And at St. Mary in Long Beach, which is where I was born. And
was it the hospital you were born at, or just the same?
It was the hospital I was born at.
Oh, that's really cool.
And fatefully, it was where the rebirth of my aspirations
you
for
were
medicine
born
were
and
born.
reborn.
I was reborn, yeah, sort of like Jesus. Volunteered. I found that I love working in a hospital. I mean, at the time I did, and I still do. I mean, I haven't really been in the hospital much since we've been in class, right? I haven't really seen the inside of a clinic that often. But at any rate, So while working, I went to school at night, open enrollment. I had spent a lot of time applying to all these formal post-bac programs and got denied from every one of them because they would usually have this minimum GPA requirement that I couldn't meet because my undergrad was trash. So I ended up going to this open enrollment program at UCLA Extension shout out to UCLA Extension. Spent tens of thousands of dollars there and hundreds, maybe thousands of hours.
Yeah.
Definitely thousands of hours. And made it here.
Yeah. So something I really wanted to touch on was Kyle mentioned that he was 25 and he had this sort of conversation with himself where he wanted to find out, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? Mm-hmm. And like I said before, it's been a real eye-opener for me finding out how much time we have. Because for me, graduating from college at 21, just the idea of 4 years down the road, then deciding what I was going to do and completely changing my life path, it was something I'd heard of in this abstract sense, but it didn't really become real to me until I came here and met people like Kyle who sort of changed my perspective. So while we're talking about these different roads, we thought it would be a good idea to interview some of our fellow medical students and have them talk a bit about the roads they went down. So now we've got Kyle Grover, a second-year medical student here. So we've got two Kyles, and I'm extremely confused.
So growing up, my dad's a veterinarian, and so I spent a lot of time around medicine, just not with people, and that's really what got me interested in medicine in general. Spent a lot of time taking care of sick cows.
This is Olivia Chase. She's a second-year medical student here.
So my mom is originally from Guam, which if you don't know where it is, it's a tiny island in the North Pacific, and there's a lot of indigenous groups there. And so I had the opportunity one winter break to work in the public health office there and just sort of see how people of different cultures interact with physicians. And for me, one of the things that stood out was cultural competence.
All right, so we have Jared Blade with us. He's a first-year medical student.
I had a big shoulder surgery in high school, and I thought the whole recovery process and then the fact that they could completely fix my shoulder and make it better than my other shoulder was just really fascinating to me.
Wow, even better?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, it's definitely my good shoulder now.
I should bring my shoulder. Both of them.
Okay.
I know some of you, every single one of us, all of you who are watching, you are on your own path. You are somewhere right now. And a lot of us, we look back with regrets. We might think, man, I really wish I'd done better on that test. Or man, I wish I hadn't taken that gap year. Or man, I wish I'd gone to medical school. Something along those lines. But something a really wise piece of advice I once received was, if you're ever having a regret about the past, just imagine it would have been worse. And that might not be that might not be technically true, but it's a good way of keeping your focus on what you can change. Just think if you're thinking, oh, I wish I'd gone to medical school. Well, it would have been worse. You would have hated that place. You would have gotten into a school with classmates that you just don't get along with. I think when we're looking back on our roads, I think it's just important to be positive and realize that the decisions we made, even though in hindsight we might not feel like they were, even in hindsight we might have regrets, those are usually the decisions that we made in that moment that we thought were the best ones.
Yeah, and I think a good defense against regret is to realize that back then I was doing the best that I could in that moment, right? And if I was capable, if I had the awareness within me to make different decisions or to follow different decisions, I would have, right? So I was, in essence, doing the best I could with the level of awareness and willingness that I had back then. Yeah. And that's I think opens up a great door for for acceptance and for moving on. And
right, and as you go through life, you gain awareness. That's just part of that process.
I'm currently aware that Dan did not shower this morning.
You got me.
But Dan doesn't know whether or not I have socks on because I have long pants.
Perfect.
But if he was older, he would know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's just those are sixth senses that we develop as we grow. My path, even though there may be some regrets associated with it, I can make good use of that by sharing it with somebody else who may have had a similar experience and showing them that, hey, not all is lost, or you may have experienced that. This is how I got out of that too. And it's interesting that we can actually make assets out of our quote-unquote negative experiences from the past.
Yeah, I think, and that ties into something that's so important in medicine. So much of it is about connecting with people. At the end of the day, medical students will focus so much on test scores, and of course, learning facts and being able to remember them well is important. But beyond a certain point, you are working with people and trying to figure out what issues they're having and helping them through their struggles. And sometimes having that extra perspective can really help you out. Those unique perspectives you had, there's just some patients that you'll be able to help in a way that no other physician could. And that's a really cool feeling when you're able to turn an experience that you didn't think was so great into something really powerful and effective. So there's this quote from Lord of the Rings where, I don't remember the exact wording of it, but basically it goes, you got to watch out for roads. If you're not careful, your feet will get swept out from under you and you never know where the road will take you. And I think that really sums up what is so cool and exciting about the paths we take in life. Sometimes life just takes us up and it sweeps us away and we don't really know where we're going or where we'll end up. But that's part of what makes life so exciting and valuable.
Yeah, I would agree. And not all who wander are lost. But I was lost.
Honestly, I'm still lost.
I'm still lost. There's a guy named Alan Watts. Have you heard of Alan Watts? He's like some.
He sounds like an electrical demon.
He was an electrical. No, I'm just kidding. He was like some spiritual guru back in the day.
Could he summon lightning?
He could out of his arse, just like William Wallace. He said just this one little talk he was given. He said, so imagine you could dream any dream you wanted. You had the power to do that, and he said, naturally you would live out all your fantasies in your dreams, and you could dream however long you wanted. So over 70 years of dreaming, right? You would have done everything you wanted, and at the end of it, you would come out and say, well, that was fun. How about let's have a surprise, right? Let's have something that's not under my control, and you would experience that, and you'd say, wow, that was fun. But then naturally you would take further and further gambles as to what's going to come up, and eventually you would find yourself where you are right now, and you would dream the dream of living the life that you're living today.
Whoa.
Yeah.
If I am abstractly philosophizing, I try to think of a perfect world. There's just like, I can't really think of one where I would be satisfied forever, but I'm really happy with my life right now. And I think there's a lot of truth to what you just said.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I mean, it's like, because sometimes I'm not satisfied with the way things are,
Yeah, right. It's like, I might not that's not to say that I'm always happy, but when I think about, I like this life that I live, and deep down I really wouldn't want it to be much different.
Yeah, an attitude of gratitude, right? I mean, that's the ideal. If I can be grateful for what I have, it sort of it opens me up to receiving more.
Hey, if you liked our video, please like and subscribe. And if you didn't like our video, dislike and subscribe.
But please, bring some helpful commentary.
Yeah, make sure to comment with your favorite raspberry tart recipe. That would help us out a lot.
That would be very helpful.
We're very hungry.